Hello everyone and welcome to episode 94 of Competitive Magic with the Carnies. I'm your host from Italy, Andrea Mengucci, and joining me we have Javier Dominguez from Spain.
Hello everyone.
And Anthony Lee from Australia.
Hola.
Javier, are you happy that I called you for second this time?
Yeah, actually I was thinking that, nice, I'm back to second place. I only needed Mengu to top EDRC with the deck Anthony said it was bad. But I'm glad that happened. And congratulations.
Last time, thank you. Last time I called you, last because it was like the great introduction to the world champion. But some people in the comments said that we should have put some music on to call for the world champion title.
We can sing. Anthony loves when we sing.
No, I really dislike it when you sing because it's not very good. But proving my point. But
all right,
was there specific music they wanted, or just music in general?
I think somebody mentioned the John Cena music, but I don't really know why. Not a big wrestling lore fan.
So okay.
Maybe
it would have been appropriate, yes.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, last weekend, despite my very big nose that was shown on camera many times, I was able to do very well in the regional championship tournament in France, in Pioneer. Hooray! It was cool. Did you guys watch the coverage?
Yeah, but also, what do you mean in spite of your big nose? If you think about it, Mengu, I haven't seen you destroy a tournament like this before, and you didn't have the big nose then. So maybe you actually won because of your big nose. Have you considered that?
It is definitely strange because basically, especially during day one, I had a nose infection and keeping my glasses actually hurted me. So I was only putting my glasses on during the games and then I was taking them off all the time. And so, it was actually a painful experience, but despite that, I was able to win basically every match. So it was definitely, not usual, not usual.
I think you found the secret then.
Yeah, I should just feel pain whenever I play Magic.
Well, maybe have a big nose, It worked for me.
Wow, we're actually figuring it out.
Thankfully, my nose is back to normal, and So last episode, at the very end of the podcast, we talked briefly about Rakdos Pioneer. Javier and Anthony tried to convince me to move away from Jansak, which I already had sleeved up, and submitted on MTG Melee, and build Rakdos, which I actually did. As soon as we finished the call, I went with Pivo, who was locked on Rakdos, and we discussed the change that, you guys suggested. But in the end, I watched him playing a bit because I was not feeling good to play. So I was just watching him play a few games. I saw him, not having the best games. So I'm like, whatever. I'm playing Jansak. So yeah, I watched my friend Lorenzo Terlizzi play a lot, either on Discord but also on stream. So I was able to learn the lines. I played a few set of matches against Phoenix. Lost most of the matches, but I had a good feeling about the games. And yeah, at the tournament, I never lost against Phoenix. I only lost once in the top 8, unfortunately, against Black Green Food. Which was another sacrifice deck that did very well in the weekend. So definitely, it's funny because only 3 sacrifice deck day 2'd. It was me, Mark, and Lorenzo, but we also did very, very well. So I'm not sure really what to say about if the deck was actually a great choice or if we just played better, run better.
If you're picking 3, if the deck only wins with those 3 players, those are clearly in the very top percent of the field, right? Like Talitzi, Mengucci, Tobias are all very recognizable names to anyone who follows tournament Magic. Seems maybe not random. Either
sure, but yeah, but for example, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Either Like, it may mean that only very strong players chose this deck, or overwhelmingly, like, maybe only very few people chose it, but only, like, the good players picked it. Or maybe only the good players can play it well enough, because it's very difficult. That's also possible. Could just be
Yeah,
random, like,
it was very underplayed for sure. Like for the power level that it was very underplayed. Like for example, to your point, like is the Phoenix, there was so many great players playing Phoenix, and at the end of the day, only Stefan Schultz made the top eight to the X3 score. Um, so I feel like it was a great choice. Honestly, it's bad matchups like Lotus Field and maybe Blue Eye Control, but I'm not even sure how bad that is. Weren't really present, so I was just very happy to play against any opponent, especially Rakdos Demons and Jump Phoenix, which is sorry, I don't know say Jump Phoenix, and is it Phoenix, which is what I played against the most. So yeah, I think it was a good metagame call. I don't know if for the next week RC in Canada is still gonna be a good choice, but I think that if you know how to play it, I think it's a very powerful deck.
yeah. I mean, I don't really see why it would be bad. Maybe if people respond to it, I don't know if there are like good angles to attack this deck, but in general, I wouldn't assume that people are going to respond massively. Like, I don't think metagames for RCs can change from week to week like that, right? Like, we're not going to suddenly see people decide to play Lotus this week for their RC because John Sacrifice will be more popular or something. Um, so it would be weird if the deck wasn't good for the weekend. Unless there are hate cards, I don't know. Maybe you can speak to that, but so it depends on what level of response is needed, right?
Yeah. So the one of the hate cards that you can easily put in your deck is Idezugu, who consumes all.
Oh
That
yes.
card was actually present in all of the Rakdos Demons opponent I played against. The two ones that made top eight both had two Idezugu and even another opponent on Rakdos I played against. That card is very scary because I think Scavenger Talent unchecked is usually game over against
Yes.
mid range decks, but if you have removal spell, it's a totally different story.
Okay, so they can play Hidetsugu consumes one. I guess the green white decks can play Yashan, right? That's probably also good against you, I assume.
Yeah, the
Um,
green white matchup felt very easy, but
yeah,
I actually never played against Yashard.
yeah, that used to be like the tip top hate card. So maybe people can play a little hate for John, but I also feel like if you weren't gonna play John in Calgary already, I don't know. I feel like you would only have had a couple of days to pick it up, right? I think it's not enough because that deck is actually very hard. I think. I would feel pretty scared to pick it up in only a couple of days for a big tournament like the RC. So I don't know. I sort of feel like maybe it shouldn't have. I think it's just too hard for it to affect things. Like, I think if you weren't going to play this deck already, it's too hard to play it quickly, and I think it also can't be so popular that you should respond in a huge way to it, other than maybe adding like a sideboard card or something. So I think people shouldn't overreact. Maybe in the longer term though, like if there's tournaments a little further out, I think I would very seriously think about how this affects the metagame, but not for
Yeah,
Calgary,
so
I think.
there is a big change at the RC in Canada with respect to the one in Lille is that expedition map is legal. Now
Oh,
that's gonna make the decks that play Lotus Field more consistent.
okay.
So yeah, Expedition Map is a card that's gonna be printed in the Foundation set. It's gonna be in Standard for 5 years. That also means it's gonna be in Pioneer forever. And this card makes sure that Lotus Field gets access to their Lotus Field more likely, more often. Even Blue-White Lotus Field, which is another bad matchup for Jansak.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the kind of a big thing about the map as well is that if you can play it in Blue Red Lotus, like there's a version of Blue Red Lotus that has artist talent currently. If you get to add map to that deck, then uh, not only is that deck quite a bit better than it was before, maybe, but it's also a much easier deck to pick up than the previous Lotus deck, which makes it easier for people to pick that pick that deck up on short notice compared to the other Lotus deck. So I think it's not only about improving the deck, but also making it a lot more accessible, right? So it's more possible for numbers of loaders to spike. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really think about the possible impact of that. Maybe that's significant.
I mean, it has to be, right? Like, I think like the expedition map is just like a very powerful card. Like, it's probably in terms of raw power level the most powerful card in the set. It's just like a card that's been consistently playable in modern and even fringe playable in legacy or whatever. Like, it's just like it's gonna find its way in Pioneer, right? I mean, probably not in Standard, but the card is just very powerful for that specific aspect, like just powering land decks.
I mean,
Yeah.
there is another card that can be played in Pioneer. It's Boltwave. This is the sorcery lava spike, and Pioneer Burn isn't really a deck, but you have like a ton of burn spells. You have Boar's Charm, you have Skewer the Critics, and so on. You're only really missing Lightning Bolt and Goblin Guide from Modern. So this could be another strategy that comes up with the new set foundations.
Oh, I'm not sure that a burn deck is very playable in Pioneer. I feel like you're not really faster than a lot of decks, and you you're not faster and you don't interact that much. Like if there were more decks centered on small creatures, maybe it would be possible, but I think you will struggle a lot against anything that doesn't have small creatures because you'll both be slower and won't be able to stop them, which is
Yeah,
uh, a bit
yeah, yeah.
doomed.
I would definitely not suggest to play Born, but I was just saying,
Yeah.
the new cards impact in Pioneer. Those two is the one that I thought about. But to return to John and what you said, that you don't recommend people picking this up because it is difficult. That's something that I'm trying to kind of move away from, as in, I don't want to just play, whatever I'm confident win, which in my case is Reckless mid range, and don't want to just change deck because maybe I don't have infinite time to test. At the end of the day, the game plan of this deck is very repetitive, as in, you're trying to do the same thing every game. Now, sure, there are some turns where, you know, you don't know whether you should level up the scavenger talent or play a spell or anything like that, and obviously that's difficult, but it's just, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just magic, right? And at the end of the day, this is just a powerful deck that I don't think you should be too scared of picking up, because again, I picked it up with a limited amount of testing. I definitely learned a lot as I played the tournament, but mostly just the power level of the deck carried so much, and it really felt like I was favorite against anything I was playing against for most of the tournament. Now, obviously, I was winning a lot, so must have drawn very well. I very often had Oven Cat and Scavenger Talent in my hand, so that makes the deck stronger. But I want to just suggest you to pick up the unknown and not just go with the things you're comfortable with.
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, I think in principle that can be true, but it depends a lot on the deck itself. And I think, well, I mean, I think for you it's maybe easier to pick up a deck like this, right? Because, I mean, the main deck that you play is not as dissimilar to this one in in a lot of the specific difficulties. But I think for a lot of people that are not Andrea Mengucci, it's much harder to pick up a deck like this on short notice. And you had played it a lot before, so you played some before at least, right? Didn't you? I could be wrong.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, no,
Yeah,
I understand what you
I
mean.
actually disagree strongly. Like, this is a super clear survivorship bias situation. I mean, you have done very well in many tournaments in your life. How many of these times you have done well in a big tournament with a deck you were semi clueless with, compared to how much you have done actually well in big tournaments where you knew the deck very well? Like, I don't think what you said is simply how things work. Obviously, you did well this time. I also have done well with tournaments where in GPs or whatever where I pick up the deck day before, but it doesn't mean I think it's a good idea. It's just sometimes it's better to play something that
Well,
you don't know
it,
more
it
about a lot about. But I don't think this is a good approach overall.
it's also about like how many tournaments where you played a deck that you didn't know and then did poorly, right? That's the more direct comparison, I think, and it's kind of easy to see how it can go wrong as well, right? Like if you remember Phoenix or back in the day, like that was a time that you picked up a deck that was very powerful, but didn't have time and it was punishing. So it can go both ways, right? The thing is that it's polarized. So
It's just that I decided to take the approach of, playing the quote unquote best deck at the moment rather than just taking the safe choice. It was mostly after watching, a couple of PTs in a row where I decided to not play the best deck. Two in a row were PT Chicago, where I didn't play Blue Red Phoenix in Pioneer, and then the next PT Standard, where I didn't play the Timberlands because I was afraid that I didn't have enough time to test. And, saw my friends and teammates do that and actually did very well. And it was like, why should I just always doubled out my deck choices? And I kind of stopped doing that. Now I just embrace the deck that is more powerful, just go with the mindset of I can do this and, spend time learning it, studying it. And this time it went well for sure, but it is something that I don't want to, I want to tell the listeners, the viewers, to not always be, that scared that if Javier is playing 200 matches with a deck and you are playing 10, then you're just gonna fail for sure because there's somebody else doing like 20 times more the work that you're doing. This is what I wanted to say.
Uh, well, I will not agree much. I don't think it's about quantity or more than actually quality. I do think though there's different players and different skill sets and also different situations. Like I don't specifically think there's like a way that's better for everyone. So at the very least, you can get away with the fact that what works for Mengu doesn't work for me as well, and the other way around. There's a point where playing the deck that's right to play is more important. Like I have been on that ship, but I also think that is the very first and most common excuse I've seen to not go deep into like Magic archetype learning or whatever. So be aware of that trap because that's how you end having like I don't know the word, superficial knowledge instead of like deep knowledge. And I think that's also where like I think that's becoming increasingly worse the toughest your opponents become. Like if you're playing a local game store, it's much more like easy to pick up a deck and play than if you're playing like Worlds on day 2 or playing a top 8 or whatever, right? So there's also like a thing to consider. I don't know how Anthony feels about this though.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I lean a little bit more towards playing what you know over a deck that might be better in the abstract by quite a bit, which I think, I mean, both Javier and I have chosen basically the same deck for a long time, and we have that our preference is very clearly that if you look at the decks that we've played. But I do think it varies. I do agree that it varies on level of play. I don't even know if I would go to that extreme of like, I mean, World State 2 is not an experience applicable to many people, but I think even like RC Day 2s are tough, right? Like even at that level, I think I would very easily choose a deck that I was more comfortable with and understood how to navigate against a strong opponent. I don't know. If you look at this RC, like that Day 2 is like, it's hard. You look at Mengu's opponents, it's like not very far from like a Pro Tour experience already at the high
Well,
tables.
but it's also about the deep, like how deep you get with the deck. Like for me, if I like, for example, for this Pioneer tournament, I would probably play Rakdos or Phoenix, just not Sacrifice. Not because I don't think Sacrifice is like bad, just because I think I know how to play Phoenix and Rakdos too well compared to that deck. But if I was gonna play Lotus, which I can play but not very well, and then I can move into another deck. Like I think if you know a deck well, but it's not like nothing, it's like nothing special, you should be more inclined to jump into a deck that's good for the weekend. Like that's how I ended up playing this Sky Control back in the day. If you remember, Humans was very bad, Mengu, so I just jump into another deck. But if you think your deck is good enough and you know it deeply, I think just jumping is not a good thing. Like I don't think Mengu did anything bad this weekend not playing Rakdos. I think that would be bad if Mengu had played like, I don't know, a lot and knew all the deck's details in and out for all the matchups. Like I think one aspect that's quite underrated, and it's usually the one of the things I struggle the most when I play a deck on these conditions. Like this condition being like I play this deck even though I don't know it deeply, but I'm just playing it because, I think it's best, and I have learned in the last days or whatever. It's just sideboarding when I'm playing matchups I have not played before, which obviously is always like challenging, but it's way more challenging when you don't have enough experience compared to like you play the matchup a lot and you know the decks in and out, and then you sideboard because you know what the matchup is supposed to look like. But I think sideboarding with this deck, for example, if you have never played a matchup specifically, can be tough. Even, I mean, obviously the green black matchup was hard to sideboard, but even the stuff like, I don't know, Angels, which is obviously a good matchup, but like how you actually gonna sideboard or that kind of thing is not necessarily easy. Like, I don't know if you, Mengu, felt like at some point of a tournament, like that if you were like on like, under pressure because you didn't know how to sideboard very well, or you had like, I also don't know how much deep you went into this deck before the tournament, I assume to some extent. But that's something I did struggle a lot. Specifically, I'm thinking of like the SK Control, but also some other situations where I played decks like this. When I was sideboarding, I will be like, yeah, I don't really know. I don't know if you felt this tournament.
Yeah, so it helped a lot that I was practicing with Lorenzo, and he has a full cyber guide, a Patreon about the deck. So he was actually just coaching me throughout the experience, so that something like, if you play against Rakdos and they have no Idezugu, you don't sideboard, but if they have Idezugu, you bring in Thoughtseize, stuff like that. Is definitely like a lot of tips that would help me. But for example, in the cyber plan he had against the Zur, it was siding out one Igra. And I played game 1, I played Igra, and his deck just has like push, vanishing verse, just very few answer for Igra, and it was just winning the game by itself. So I'm like, why am I sideboarding it out? It's probably, it's probably not well thought, so I didn't sideboard out Igra. Stuff like this. It's obviously up to your skill to decide when to go away from the cyber plan. And I think that obviously my experience makes me able to decide that. But I think starting from a base of having a cyber plan from a person that put 10 times the amount of matches in the deck helps a lot, I think.
No, definitely.
Well,
I mean, that's a big change. Like, yeah, that's a big change to the situation. I mean,
yeah, I think that, obviously it's contextual, and that's like a specific feature of a context, but then it changes, right? Because you do have access to a much higher baseline. But I think in this case it certainly works out because Tolizzi knows the deck very well and he's good. But I don't know how often that's the case for a lot of decks. So
again, what I was saying was, as I said, survivorship bias and everything, but it's something that I decided to start doing lately, to just kind of embrace a new deck and not be too, because like also I kind of leave these tournaments as in, if I do poorly, whatever, I'm not gonna be like, too disappointed about it. So it's kind of like, this tournament in particular was kind of a free roll for me because I was even considering not going because of my nose. So if I would have done poorly, whatever. So it's a lot of things, and I understand that I'm just. But for example, let's say expedition map is legal, and some friends of yours have done 3 days of testing, and they decided this card is broken. It's too good to not play, and you have access to these informations, and you're like, wait, but this deck is too hard. I don't want to play Lotus Field because, it's too hard. Well, maybe you just have one day, on Thursday, you go all in on the deck, you play for 12 hours, and then you register the quote-unquote broken deck. I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm just saying in abstract, rather than the stock Rakdos deck that you are going to play. So this is my suggestion, to just kind of be a little bit more brave in this situation.
I mean, that's something that could work. Like, I think it's hard to define the line, obviously, but so I think what Mengu says could be the correct case for some people. So I think the most important factors are, one, like, remember, the magic is not only about how well you play, it's about how well you play versus how well they play. So the more new the deck is and the more like hard it is to play or sideboard against, the more you should be inclined to pick it up. I think that's kind of obvious if you think about it, but it's also easy to forget. Like, if your deck is very hard to play but also hard to play with, you should be way more inclined to play it. And then again, as I said before, how good you feel with alternative. Like if you are a very, 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 very good Phoenix player like Stefan or whatever, well, you probably should stick to your thing and be less inclined to jump. But if you don't have like expertise within the decks and your friends have this broken Lotus deck or whatever, or so-called broken, yeah, I mean, that's a good reason already to, as Mengu says, be brave. I don't really like calling this brave, but if that's the word we're using, I guess. But I think there are situations where this call is definitely right, and certainly for some players, I'm gonna agree there. Like some players should definitely do it more often than they do. It really depends on everyone, the way I see it.
For sure. But yeah, so this was my experience. Again, great tournament. Went to 8-0 day one. Started the day two with 3-0. Then I just took a break for 4 hours. I went on a concession draw ID last 3 rounds. And then started the top eight. Actually, this is funny. So I don't know if you guys feel the same, but whenever I have these like small tournament where you go like 3-0 double ID, you kind of forget about your deck, right? And I like to be back in the mind, so I just forced a friend of mine to play, like half an hour against me before the top eight. So this was, yeah, this was something. So I played my top eight against Mark on Green Black Food, which is an interesting deck, definitely the most innovative deck of the top eight, and he also ended up winning the tournament. He was playing a card that I didn't see, that I didn't know before, that I had to read. Vine Reap Mentor, black and green 3/2 squirrel. When it comes into play or dies, you make a food. And this was better than Bloodthirsty Harvester, I think.
Whoa.
Well,
I could
it's
see
not.
it, but
It's a different
also,
different
whoa.
color. Yeah.
In his deck. It was better Bloodthirsty
Well,
Harvester.
yeah, because
Yeah, I guess
he
he builds
cannot cast the
around it.
Harvester. About the thing about forgetting about the deck, that's something that used to happen to me a while ago. But now I feel like it doesn't really happen. Like before, I used to, back in the old days, I used to like have warm up games or whatever. I used to like that, like even before draft rounds or before the constructor started, just play. You remember that, Mengu? We actually did that sometimes. Like play like
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
like play some warm up games or
In
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, in draft, I just need to learn the deck by heart. Like, I need to, I deck build the draft and then I just learn the deck by heart because I'm just too afraid of throughout the game. I just don't know what's in my deck and I'm not playing for my outs. In constructed, it's just, I don't know, I forget to tap my oven in response to a removal spell, stuff like that. So.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky, but so I understand what you're saying. Now it doesn't happen to me anymore. I can't really tell why. I think it's probably because I'm more focused when I'm playing now, I guess. But it's definitely something that before I used to do, and it was very good for me. Like just these warm up games, reminder games, or whatever. Like ID, just play some games before the top eight. I think that's good advice as long as it worked for you.
For sure. And yeah, so we talked, half an hour about this tournament. How about, guys, we talk about some foundations?
Okay.
All right, so there's this new set. It was pre-release was last weekend, and so it's gonna be online today, I think, as we record.
Tomorrow. Oh, yeah.
It's
Nice
it's gonna
draft
be
time. Yay! Sorry.
yeah, it's gonna be legal in standard for 5 years. This is what they decided. So better buy the cards. I don't know, but just have the cards if you plan on playing standards. So we've already talked about Boltwave. This is the burn spell that is hyping people up in modern. I'll definitely stream with this card tomorrow in modern. Again, you can also play it in Pioneer. It's probably not gonna be anything new, but it is an additional 1 mana burn spell, and that is always something that burn decks have liked in the past.
Is it? I don't know. Like, I'm not really sure what this card adds. Like, I mean, I get that burn spells are better in like you need to hit a critical mass, but so long as anything close to that mass exists, I don't really see this an effect like this tipping the scale. Like, I think the issues are not really with the deck's functionality, but with how it lines up against other decks. So, um, I would be very surprised if this was playable in any format. I could be way off here, but I don't really see it.
I mean, you could probably play it in Modern if you're already playing Burn, but also
I mean, if you're going
why
to, yeah,
why are you playing Burn now, right? And I think this is probably not as bad as it looks in terms of power level in Pioneer, but I also think like Pioneer is not built like Burn decks are sort of a combo decks that rely on fetch lands being broken, kind of. And this is not how it's working in Pioneer right now. So I think this is unlikely to be good enough. But I mean, maybe if the metagame is right for Burn, but it seems like the days where Burn is good are a bit long gone. I mean, I played Burn 1 year ago, when Scam was the best deck or whatever. So there's some things that could happen to make Burn decent, but it's mostly like to beat, like, you need one best deck in Modern that's specifically bad against Burn. If that happens, then Burn is probably fine if you have enough good cards, but I don't think this card matters that much. Like, it could be playable in there. It's probably better than a Skewer Critics or whatever they're playing now, but like, I don't think this is particularly appealing towards Burn. I think it needs more Goblin Guy type of cards, or at least Boros Charm type of cards. I think more Lava Spikes will not make the deck better. At this point, Burn will be not great in Modern if you had like only Lava Spikes on lands, right? So we need better to make Burn good in Modern, I think.
Maybe some 1-mana creatures.
Yeah, you can kind of see how those are like persistently powerful. This just isn't a rate that matters very much in Modern, and that's even setting aside, specifics like people playing Guide of Souls, which the deeply upsetting experience, or Flage or whatever.
Yeah, gaining life. All right. Let's talk about another card that can maybe see play in the older formats. Sire 7 Death, the 7-mana 7/7 Eldrazi with 7 keywords, one of them being Ward, pay 7 life, First Strike, Vigilance, Mana, Trample, Reach, Lifelink. And yeah, this card has a lot of text, and if you only tap 3 lands for it, with the Troll lands, or if you have, Eldrazi Temple, Ugin, Eldrazi's, the various land at discount, like Glaring Fleshraker or Kozilek's Command, can put this card into play much earlier than 7, and then it's just it's a very powerful card. And it's a 7-drop that you can pitch to Ugin's Labyrinth.
Yeah, that's probably the best thing you can do with it, right? Just be good with Labyrinth.
Yeah.
And just, like, I think the Eldrazi type is the only thing that puts this as remotely playable. Like, these two cards, Labyrinth being broken and this being Eldrazi. Is it good? Probably not. I mean, the Ward 7 life is a bit of, like, not super relevant, because if you're playing those decks, you usually cannot attack the life total. So if they actually play a removal spell, but lose 7 life and they, are at 20, whatever, it's not a big thing. And if you play 3 lands, because like, if you're playing Tron, you would rather have Grunkel Engine, I feel, because this is like, if they kill it, you get nothing, but Grunkel, you get the Grunkel shitters anyway, and that will be much better. So I think this is playable or not just based on Ugin's Labyrinth mostly. But then again, I mean, Eldrazi is one of the best creature type to have, and this definitely works well with that. Like, you can see some games where you go Labyrinth, Temple, whatever, Talisman, and then just play this on 5 naturally, which is okay. Still probably worse than the 7-mana Eldrazi that has Once Upon a Time text or whatever. But this could be there just to, to make Labyrinth even more consistent. I don't think it's great, but it's probably not too good. So it's good design, I guess. Kind of cool.
Yeah, kind of same spot. Like, I guess, it's a different 7-drop for that deck if they want it. So I guess it's a fine option in a fringe deck. So, it's alright. It's not that easy to break into Modern. So if we're talking about it, that's an achievement.
There's another card that we could see some Modern play. Kiora, the Rising Tide. This is a 3-mana 3/2. When it comes into play, you draw 2, discard 2. And then if you have Threshold, which means 7 cards in your graveyard, you create an 8... when it attacks, you create an 8/8 legendary token. Now, this is an enabler for graveyard strategies. I remember A few months ago, we had Streamcore Scholar that broke briefly into Modern, the 3 mana 2/2 Vigilance Flyer that does the draw 2, discard 1 type of card. I remember seeing this card in Espegorio with Ephemerate, but again, it didn't really stand out too much. But maybe Kiora in that deck can also be decent because you're self-milling a lot with Phalangian, etc. So the threshold is quite easy to achieve.
Yeah, like I think this card is a lot more interesting than the previous two, for a couple of reasons. First of all, what it does is somewhat unique, I think, in that its utility, but also is its own win condition, which is sometimes very valuable against some forms of interaction. Like it's not that good against against like mass graveyard hate, but it beats targeted graveyard hate potentially, so that's really good. So I think this has a unique function, which is something that I care about more than raw power level when it comes to seeing if a card might change whether a deck is playable. So I like that about it. But I also think that it has some other characteristics that are quite interesting. Like I don't think it's just for that deck, for example. Like being a 3 mana creature is maybe very valuable alongside Abhorrent Oculus in well, both standard and modern. Actually, funnily enough, you either using Helping Hand in standard or Unearth in modern, right? Like, kind of makes sense. I mean, I guess Oculus exiles your graveyard when you cast it. It's not great, but you tend to play a lot of like similar cards that fill your graveyard. That kind of naturally happens in modern anyway. Like, yeah, I think this card might be good, like in multiple formats actually. I'm not saying that I don't have a specific vision for how this would be played in modern, certainly, and I'm not sure it would be good, but I definitely believe it could be much more than the other cards so far. Like this seems kind of promising.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of good things going for it. For modern specifically, it seems like just underpowered. Like I don't think a 3/2 that puts an 8/8 when it attacks is acceptable for modern. Like the power level just now too high. But I think this could be good in Pioneer, Standard, or whatever. Like I could see this being good in modern if it enables a lot of kills, but I don't think that's likely. But the card is at the very least interesting. I don't think this card is likely to be good at the end. Like I don't think it's so likely that we're gonna see this in tournament deck lists or whatever in 2 months. But maybe yeah, or at least in some months. I mean, this is gonna be legal and standard for 5 years, right? So maybe at some point it's gonna be good. I just think that the sun is kind of cool. It does to cut down dash to one removals or whatever, but you get some looting, and we've learned from Fable that this type of looting attached to a creature you kind of have to kill is powerful, right? So it probably depends on how easy it is to get threshold. But yeah, I mean, this card's interesting and definitely better than the other ones. I agree with Anthony here. Like this card can actually be good. The other two they just don't seem that powerful.
Right. Let's now move to maybe the most important reprint that hasn't seen playing standard for a very long time, and I'm sure it's going to be super powerful. I mean, not super powerful, but I'm sure it's going to be powerful in standard. Llanowar Elves. Now, this card, do you remember, guys, when Pioneer first came out, people actually claimed this to be 2 format warping, and now it's okay in standard all of a sudden?
Well, I mean, it depends on what is next to it. I think like the fact that standard tends to have less powerful 3 drops and wider format changes a lot. I think, and kind of the structure of how standard games tend to play out changes the value of mana dork a lot. Like, I don't think it's a linear thing. I don't think it being somewhat overwhelming in early Pioneer necessarily carries across to it being odd for it to be acceptable for standard. I mean, like when it was first around in Pioneer, you could cast a turn 2 Oko off it, right? That's pretty different to like I don't. They were like, "What are you doing in standard? That's so broken." Nothing. There's nothing really that broken you can do, right? Um. So yeah, I think it will be good, of course, but yeah, I did want to specify that first. Like the power level of Llanowar Elves does depend on other cards, so it's not a
Yeah,
given.
well, yeah. Now, for example, in Pioneer, the only deck that plays Llanowar Elf is Green White Company, where they cast the, various 3 mana Archon. I don't know, even Interrupter, stuff like that, which is definitely, yeah. I mean, it's good, but it's not, as you said, Oko.
I think that
Yeah.
that's one thing about this is like it probably takes over green. I don't know if you agree, Anthony, but it feels like the only issue I see from a deck building perspective, it's that this will probably just be played in every game deck in standard. That's not like domain or whatever, right? If that's the case, that's not very fun.
Yeah, probably. Well, I don't know
about
if I would.
what?
Well, like Golgari is a green deck, and I mean, I think like does that count Golgari as a green deck? Because Golgari is a deck with green cards, but it's much more of a black deck than a green deck, for example. And I don't know if I would play Llanowar Elves in Golgari or if I would play Manny. I don't know. I could see literally any number of Llanowar Elves being correct in Golgari. If you told me that in a couple of months, I will submit 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 Llanowar Elves, any of those statements, I would just believe it. So I don't know
that. Like, I think there's enough threes that there's no, like, Sentinel of the Nameless City or whatever. That card goes from fine to actually bombish if you can cast in turn 2 or whatever. Like, I think there's enough cards that...
What about Anoli Annex? What about Anoli Annex on turn 2?
I don't know if the Annex is that much better when you ramp it up fast. That's the thing. Like, the thing about Llanowar is I want the 3-drop that I play to specifically be better early, right? So, like, yeah, like, obviously, like, Sentinel is a card that actually, like, has a cascading effect, so, like, it's actually good when you ramp it out faster, whereas Annex, the turn early, is less so. I don't know, maybe.
Sentinel specifically goes very well with this. Like, Sentinel just, like, is perfect with this with Llanowar Elves. Like,
so
I think...
do you think that... Go on.
I just think Golgari and all the whatever green decks probably will play this and just play, like, a lot of cards that are good with Llanowar Elves. And I think that just... Like, I don't really love this type of cards in the standard because they tend to make the games a bit... Like, they look like the same, kind of, in a way. They're not as fun to me. Like, I think one thing about the standard is how different the games tend to be once things develop and such. I think Llanowar Elves card type to, like, monopolize the gameplay in a way where, the games are over faster, but also, like, the late games are also less interesting because the Llanowar Elf deck has worse top decks as well. And I mean, we'll see, but I think this card might have that impact. Maybe not. Maybe Anthony's right. Like, I mean, in Modern, we saw, like, a lot of black decks playing just Zero. Like, was probably, like, a very big breakout. The black-green Golgari decks in Modern used to play Zero Llanowar Elves, right? And we could see that going forward, but in a Standard, I don't think it's that likely because there's not that much counterplay. Like, there's not that much counterplay to, like, turn to Sentinel or whatever, if you know what I mean. There's nothing that can compare with, like, so let me put it another way. Like, if the format is more powerful, what happens is you cannot play that many high cost mana cards anyway. And also the gap between the ones that are played in one deck that's trying to ramp and the ones that are just played in good stuff decks are not as high. Like, if you play Pioneer or Modern, if you're playing midrange, they play a 3-drop and you play a 2-drop. Chances are your 2-drop is obviously worse than 3-drop, but not as much. But in a Standard, since the power level is, the power level gap is a bit higher, I think, in terms of, like, the difference between the best cards going fast is higher. Like, I don't think you can play 2-drop that's almost as good as a 3-drop because otherwise, because it's a Standard, they will play a 2-drop regardless. Decks are not that much synergy-based or ramp-based compared to all the formats, and for the reason I think maybe we could see that. Obviously, we'll have to play a bit with the Elves, specifically in decks like Golgari, but I think that's somewhat likely. Like, last time we had this, what happened was the Chain Whirler Summer or whatever, which eventually ended kicking out Llanowar Elves, but all the green decks actually were Elf powered, so I don't know.
Yes, I agree. I actually do agree that that's more likely than not, but I just want to clarify that I do think that it's not a given, which I think a lot of people would otherwise assume. Like, people are probably assuming that it's 100% or close to 100% that Elves is definingly green, and I think that's very probably true. But I do also see a world in which that's not true. So
maybe actually now, like, this is one of the standards as it is right now that I will expect Elves to be the worst. Like, Elves are worse when target removal is king. Because if you ramp a creature, and then I go for a throat creature, and then you ramp on the creature, and you go for a throat, then you're left with lands and elves.
Llanowar Elves.
And then you die, right? But that's that's something that's like this right now. It's also not very common in the Standard for for this to hold. So even if it happens, it will probably not happen for, like a long time, because they will print enough threats that are not very easy to kill with removal, because that's how Magic kind of works. And if that happens, then boom, they print some kind of Gideon, Alive, Zendikar, or whatever. Suddenly, well, you pair it with Elves, and you have turn 3 Gideon destroying all the removal decks. If that can happen, 5 years is a lot of years. So I'm kind of surprised that they threw this into a core set that's going to last for that long, because Llanowar Elves existing, you make it so they have to be extremely careful with what they print, specifically in mana cost 3 and 4, or, well, just the risk of them just, monopolizing the not only the metagame, but also how the games play out. And that's not great. Like, if the metagame becomes like this type of mono-green mirror matches in the last year in Pioneer, where if you need to mulligan into the Elves a lot, or whatever, because, that's just basically the worst. That's the reason why Pioneer was the worst format, right? 2 years ago. And now the printing is standard. I think the presence of this card probably just, it's a net negative for standard. It tends to get played. And if it's standard, like now, I think it's easily the best format by a lot. Like, I don't think it's remotely close to be close. I think it's been like this for already some months. I think if it stops being that way, it's probably going to have something to do with this card. So that's my initial impression.
Yeah, I think genuinely Llanowar Elves is a contender for one of my least favorite designs ever. Like, I think in terms of the quality of Magic that I've played lifetime, this card has probably sucked the most joy from my Magic games total. But
I can see why, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but I do feel that way about Llanowar Elves. But I also want to give Wizards a bit of credit. I mean, they know that they're going to keep this card around. Maybe they are going to, and they know its impact from before. Maybe they're going to be very conscious about what they do print accordingly. So I guess we'll see. But
I think they will. I just think it's risky. Like, what if they
it's risky.
Some water Gideon sneaks in? Well, boom, you're gonna have like green white Gideon for years. This time now, before it was 2 years, now it's gonna be 3 years.
Hey guys, don't mess up, Wizards. We really need you to not mess up.
We like standard. Yeah.
It's really good right now.
All right, Mengu, we are done ranting.
It's okay. I always welcome a good old rant. It's okay.
I like the art of this.
I enjoy that.
This is maybe one of the best arts for Llanowar Elves, I think. Like, I think the original art for Llanowar Elves wasn't very good, but it just keeps getting better every time they reprint this card, so I think that's nice.
Yeah, I actually think it's cool, but I will play my 4th edition Spanish Black Border once, if you let me.
Okay, Boomer.
Yeah, thank you.
I actually spent $300 on Llanowar Elf last year.
Wait, beta elves, or which ones?
Yeah,
nice.
Beta for my pre-modern elf deck that I actually never played because I switched
nice.
when the elves arrived.
But they're very beautiful, so you're gonna, we'll play them in a standard.
No, I doubt. All right, let's go ahead on Bloodthirsty Conqueror. This is a mythic rare that apparently is comboing off simply in limited. Have you guys heard about this? Bloodthirsty Conqueror, 5 mana, 5/5, flying Death Touch. When the opponent loses life, you gain them much life. And there's a common reprint from Zendikar Rising, 3 mana, 3/2. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. So I guess all you need once you put these two cards together is that the opponent loses life and you win the game. This is probably playable in standard as well. Or you gain life, true.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about playable in standard, yeah.
No,
in standard,
so?
well, in standard, clearly it's not going to be that one that's good. There's multiple versions of this effect that are quite a bit better in standard. Like, you can play Enduring Tenacity, or you can play, what's it called, Starscape something, the 2/1 from Bloomburrow with Offspring. So there are certainly better versions of this effect than Marauding Blight Priest that you can combo with in standard. I mean, in terms of limited, I mean, sure, my opponent has a Bomb Mythic. I mean, I don't know, I feel like you're going to lose to this card limited a bunch, whether they have the combo or not, so, fine. But I think that's kind of cool, honestly. I think it would be funny if you lose to a combo like this limited. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I agree too. Do you think so? You think it's good that they put this kind of things, Anthony, in sets?
Yes, I do. Yes, why not? Like, I think that's fun. As long as it's not overwhelming, but that's a different thing. Like, we don't want them to make things that are too good, but I think it's totally fine to put like intentional combos in. Like, why not? I think there should be some elements of. I think all elements of the game should be accessible to some degree, and as long as they keep the depth of the game as well, I think obvious things are also good. Like, I think that's Magic is different game for many different people and who experience the game differently. So yeah, put in some obvious combos, put in some non-obvious combos, and let everybody play with them. I don't know. It sounds great to me. I think I really like this design direction. But I mean, design aside, in terms of how good this card is, I think it's really interesting. It's I don't think it's that promising as a combo. Because I think the individual pieces are not particularly good, right? Like this card is fine, I guess, but it is an expensive card that trades down with removal, and it's more expensive than the other cards that we already play that do that. So I mean, we play stuff like Archfiend of the Dross in standard, and it becomes expensive to play more of that. Maybe it's just good. Yeah, maybe like I think maybe you can just play all of those cards in a mid-range deck that has a bunch of the life gain elements, and then you have like some you have like maybe a combo you, but mostly you have a synergistic mid-range deck as well. That's a little bit more likely to me. Like I wouldn't be trying to build a deck that's just trying to combo your opponent, right? I would try to make a deck that can make both of those cards independently good, because otherwise I feel like this is kind of like a really a worse version of the Unstoppable Slasher Bloodletter combo, which hasn't. I mean, it's been fine. It's clearly playable to play Slasher and Bloodletter, but it's not overwhelming by any means. It's not really at the top of the list of things that I want to do in Standard. It's just fine. And I think this is like quite a lot worse, where the individual pieces are worse. It's more conditional, and yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting card, but I'm not. I think you have to work pretty hard for this to be good.
Cool. I mean, yeah, I think that card's interesting. I think I like the design. They're trying to do things, and I also think it's fun to have combos unlimited. Like I think I can't wait for the screenshot where I lose to the combo and post it somewhere. That's I think those kind of things are cool, and it's not like something said you were probably gonna lose often to this card regardless, but it does add some cool thing to do in the format. So I think it's good. You like it, the Mengu? You like the combo also?
Having a combo is definitely something fun. I agree with you. I enjoy when limited is has some random cards like March of the Machine, having all the special legends. It was definitely something that I liked about limited, because limited is just designed to not last too much, right? So you're just gonna play it not that long. You're gonna play it like maybe maybe us a lot more than normal people, but maybe like a normal person plays it like 10 times. And it's so nothing is going to be that oppressive. And
Yeah,
so I enjoy this.
do some cool stuff.
All right, let's go on. So you guys mentioned that cats is going to be a thing in standard, and you made me search for this very difficult card to search for. Harabo, the first Fang. I mean, a difficult name. 3 mana 2/2. It says add a cat to control game +1/+1, and when it or another cat you control enters. Oh wow, so when this card comes into play, you make a 1/1 cat too.
Yep.
So this is just a 3 mana 2/2s in play that also does a lot more. Interesting.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a lot of cats already in the format, right?
This does like I mean there's a few cats already playable, but I mean the card being quite kind of good on rate by itself is a huge part of why I see so much potential, right? Like and there's a lot of like pretty solid standalone cats. I really think this might be the time. I mean, like were never a very serious typal deck in the past, but uh, maybe this card gets you there. Like there's I think two payoffs that I thought were noteworthy. Maybe there are more that I'm not thinking about, but both this card and the Regal Caracal reprint are pretty powerful typal payoffs, and there's a lot of very solid cats, and you don't really have to um, think really deep to like you don't have to put like horrible cards in your deck to make this card work, right? Because you don't even have to play that many cats. Like if you just drew this card and one other cat, it's kind of good. Um, yeah, I think this card's really kind of exciting in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I would say saying the standard like cards will be good in standard is a bit of a overstatement of what we said. But yeah, this card's good. There's enough cards. There's a lot of potential blue white or green white decks that can be built, and I think I will definitely try this. I don't think it's super likely, but it is also a card that again is going to be legal for 5 years, so they will probably print some more cats at some point. And if they had enough, it's good and rate, as Anthony said. There's also like 2 mana cat Elves Visionary, like 2 mana 1/1 cat draw card when it comes into play. And this type of cards tend actually to be the backbone of decks like Merfolk, Elves, or whatever. So cats now have one. So if there is a cat deck, those two cards are definitely going to be like an important part of it.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, just to list some of the cats that can play alongside this. So we have this card. Helpful Hunter is the card that Javier was mentioning. Another 2-drop in this set that is maybe very good. Like I think it's just a good card in general. Maybe Sky Knight Squire is a cat that synergizes especially with Aravo. That attack very quickly. We have a couple of good 1-drops in Savannah Lions and Leon in Vanguard. Kurtz's Flanker was a cat that was played before. Like it's just a good card you can put in your deck. Strangely, Kemba Car Enduring is a cat synergy card. Maybe that's a real thing. Even Enduring Curiosity is a cat. Maybe you're not playing a white blue cats deck. Like I think there's no shortage of candidates. So yeah, I'm kind of it's something I'll definitely be excited to try out. Yeah. Here's another cat you've got on your screen.
There is another cat, exactly, I was going to say that. Soulstone Sanctuary, this is a land. As for colorless, and for 4 mana, it becomes a 3/3 with vigilance and all the creature types. So this is basically a mutable, right? It's the same.
Well, not the same, but it has...
No, it's not. It's not the same.
Didn't there used to be... Javier will know this. There used to be a land like this, like
this
800
is Stalking
years ago,
Stones,
right?
not mutable, you young players. Yes.
What is Stalking? It's like this, right? Is it the same mana cost?
But for 6 mana instead of 4, and no vigilance and no creature types. So this was extended playable. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Kai would have won out some Protoss with them.
Jeez.
Yeah. I don't actually know Stalking Stone.
No, Stalking
Where's
Stone.
That from?
Stalking Tempest.
I vaguely remember a card like this. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, Tempest.
Oh, yeah, with Mirrodin. I remember with the Mirrodin art because it's when I started playing Magic. Magic.
Yeah, I mean, this card, I think the only mono blue slow deck played like 1 or 2 copies in the standard with Valkyrie Shackles and the such. But this was
that art
like,
is so good.
This was pretty bad in a standard already. But three feels a lot. I think this card is obviously much better. I mean, this is powerful enough to be played. Ideally, in a decks where 1 care about creature type, or 2 decks are like pretty much monocolor and can play one or 2 of this card. One thing though is this doesn't play as bad as it looks in multiples. Like if you have 2, you can go like into activate 1 and then activate another 1 and attack for 6 or whatever. This is probably a very good page to play mono red with a bit more of land drops.
It's forever? It's not till end of turn?
No, it's forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's Stalking Stones.
Oh, I didn't know that.
This could be kind of bad.
Otherwise, it will be like wildly unplayable, yeah.
So you know, guys, when I suggested this card to you, I thought you would be like, this card sucks while you're suggesting it. And I'm pretty sure it was awful because I thought it was until end of turn, and then you were like, "Oh no, yeah, that's true. Let's talk about this card." I'm like, "Oh wow, okay, I guess I'm gonna change my opinion." And now I do change my opinion because I thought this was until end of turn. Instead, it's 4 mana. It becomes a 3/3 forever. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's good, right? It's a creature. Also, vigilance is a type of thing that does impact a lot because this also gives mana, and the creature types it's good with annex. I don't know this looks good. I mean, our standard expert probably has more to say about this.
Yeah, I don't know. Like the fact that this is a demon, I think, is a huge help. Like I could easily see playing this. Like I will definitely try it in Golgari over Fountain. Like I think Fountain Port is great, but maybe having more demons is awesome, and the rate on this is kind of good anyway. I mean, there are other types that matter as well. Like we talked about cat, but for example, somewhat recently I've been playing Kaito with Mutavault in Pioneer, and like that interaction was very impressive. Actually, I think Mutavault being a ninja was surprisingly relevant when I was trying to put pressure on them. So like this card working with Kaito really well could be relevant too. Like it's just so easy for these small synergies to crop up with the way they design cards in a slightly more open-ended way now. So the very obvious one is that this is a demon in a deck that can already afford to play colorless lands. I think that's huge. But I would definitely expect this card to come up a lot in the next 5 years. So for now, he's a demon ninja, also a fairy, if that matters. You know, maybe you have this card and spell stutter in your deck. But yeah, I think this is one of the standout cards of the set, probably. Probably not like it's probably kind of subtle, to be fair. Like it's not really gonna create a new deck, I assume, but it's gonna be very good in a variety of decks. So I like this card a lot.
So this might be something that you guys know already and don't wanna, don't care about hearing, but I played Fountain Port for the first time this past weekend, and wow, what a strong card it is.
You've been missing out. It's so good,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Tell us about it.
Yeah,
we just put it in a
I've
deck
never
with only black, like with a 6 black card.
Like, I've never played this card before, and I mean, my deck also makes a lot of random tokens, so I just, basically, anytime I drew Fountain Port, I knew that in the late game, this would have been, like, top 3, I mean, top 2 plus this draw card, with no downside, because I always had a token. Or sometimes you just make a fish, man, it was amazing, to the point where I'm thinking maybe you could play 2 Angel Sacrifice. But
yeah, maybe.
it's not, probably not, but yeah. So definitely a card I'm happy to own 2 copies of, because I'm sure we're gonna play 2 or more in the future for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun to play with, and it was so impressive. I remember in Bloomburrow thinking, oh, this might be one of the best cards in the set, maybe, and somehow my opinion of it slightly increased after. So yeah.
Yeah, there was a line where I found lethal that was super cool. Basically, I had Devil in play, so you go 4 mana, make a treasure, suck the treasure, ping my cat, sacrifice all the food, bring it back, and shoot. That was that was obviously not needed, because that's what Just Sacrifice does most, just overkills. But sometimes actually you have these like 20 damage type of plays, and Fountain Port with all these modes was definitely super cool. So, but yeah, I'm sure you didn't need to hear about how strong is Fountain Port.
Okay, we found Port enjoys. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Do you guys have anything else to say, or are we good to wrap up this time?
I think we're good. I did like the Fountain Port talk. I think the card's great.
Yeah. I don't have anything specific. I'm sure that we'll probably revisit some more Foundations cards. I mean, I know this is a really deep set. Like, I felt like, I mean, the set actually does have a lot of cards in it, but also it's pretty dense. Like, even if there's not anything that looks like it's blow away powerful, there's just so many cards that matter, I think, in the spoiler. It was hard to pick just some of them to talk about this week, so we'll probably have more next week, I assume. I'm gonna play it a bit with the formats, right? So that'll be fun.
Yeah, I'll play with Boltwave and Break Modern with Burn, new archetype.
Okay. You play with Boltwave, we'll play with
unlikely.
Kiora.
Yeah.
Probably not. It's okay. All right, then. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, if you enjoy the show, I want to chat with us throughout the week. There is the patreon.com/carnies to join our Discord. And until next time, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.